A vast mountain surface was carved with 5 spacious caves, and Chen resided in one of them, sitting quietly in meditation. This place would be where they would enter seclusion to break through during this period. Chen sat cross-legged on a smooth, cool piece of azure rock. A puff of white air escaped his mouth, and he turned his gaze to the right, where subtle fluctuations of spiritual energy were transmitted through layers of rock. Clearly, Luoli, Su Huang, and the others had already entered their respective cultivation caves and were preparing for their upcoming breakthroughs. Physical body tribulation. Chen slightly clenched his palms. In his black eyes, a fiery glow surged. These were the last 3 tribulations on the path to Supreme, and without a doubt, they were the most difficult and dangerous trials. Countless talents had come to a halt at this stage, and many years of hard cultivation had been wasted in these 3 tribulations, leaving them to die in bitterness. The minor physical body tribulation was enough to make anyone below the supreme level tremble. Its terrifying reputation had already become deeply ingrained in people's hearts, even for those who hadn't personally experienced it. Thus, even though Chen's physical body was already incredibly stronger than some experts who had passed the physical body tribulation, he still felt some nervousness at this moment. He understood that the stronger his body, the greater the suffering he would endure when facing the physical body tribulation. Of course, the benefits from overcoming it would be even more significant in the end. Where there is power, there is always risk. Chen took a deep breath and slowly closed his eyes, entering a state of cultivation. As his mind slightly moved, the spiritual energy within his body began to circulate rapidly through his meridians, one cycle after another, continuous and unending. Generally speaking, once one reached the late stage of the heaven-reaching stage, they would encounter the physical body tribulation. Of course, the tribulation would not appear on its own. It required manual control. It was said that once a person was ready for the physical body tribulation, the spiritual energy within them would begin to circulate rapidly, flowing through the meridians. This energy would gradually leak out of the meridians and seep into the flesh. When one's strength reached such a level, the blood qi within the body would grow so powerful that it reached a point of saturation. Once this blood qi fused with the high-speed flowing energy, it would turn into a blood flame. This blood flame, born within the flesh, would spread throughout the body, burning and refining the flesh, making the body stronger. However, if one could not endure this refining process, their flesh would be burned and vaporized by the blood flame, causing immense damage to the body. This was the origin of the physical body tribulation. The fire within the flesh, born from within, was unavoidable. No external force could help. Only relying on oneself could truly overcome it and undergo transformation through the blood flame. Chen sat quietly in his cave for 3 full days. His spiritual energy continued to operate at high speed, and if one could observe Chen's body at this moment, they would see that his meridians had turned faintly red and were burning with heat. An imperceptible force emanated from the scorching meridians, gradually seeping into his flesh. Sharp pain surged from all directions within Chen's body, but he remained still. He knew this was the early sign of the blood flame igniting. This pain was nothing compared to what he would experience when the physical body tribulation truly arrived. If he couldn't endure this much, then it would be better not to attempt the physical body tribulation at all. Chen's skin had turned bright red and was scorching hot. The cave became unusually dry, as the humidity was evaporated by the high temperatures radiating from his body. As his skin became increasingly red, tiny blood droplets began to seep from his pores, sliding down his hot skin with a sizzling sound. A faint white mist rose from his body. Sizzling. The sound became more intense as blood droplets continuously seeped from Chen's skin, evaporating into white mist that nearly enveloped his entire body. Within the mist, Chen slightly opened his eyes. Clenching his teeth, he tightened his fist, and a jade-like green fruit appeared in his palm. That was the divine spirit fruit that Chen had obtained from the ruins. This fruit had a certain auxiliary effect on overcoming the physical body tribulation. Chen quickly shoved the divine spirit fruit into his mouth, but instead of swallowing it, he held it in his mouth. With the fruit in his mouth, Chen's hand seals suddenly changed. Immediately, the spiritual energy flowing within his body began to accelerate once more. Hiss hiss. The boiling hot meridians surged in temperature, and strange forces swiftly spread through his flesh and blood. Roar. Suddenly, Chen's body shuddered violently. His teeth even bit through his lips, drawing blood. At that moment, clusters of blood-red flames erupted within his flesh and blood, appearing out of thin air. They spread like wildfire, rapidly engulfing every corner of his body in less than a minute. The blood-red flames burned fiercely, sticking to his flesh. The heat they released seemed intent on refining his flesh and blood, bringing unimaginable, excruciating pain. Mu Chen's body trembled incessantly. Sweat instantly covered him, but as soon as the sweat appeared, it was evaporated into steam by his searing skin. Grinding his teeth, Mu Chen's veins bulged, writhing like worms under his skin, making him appear utterly grotesque. His once handsome face twisted in agony. Inside Mu Chen's body, wherever there was flesh and blood flames were spreading. The flames clung to the flesh, sizzling as they burned. The once vibrant and powerful flesh now seemed to pulsate with life, but under the burning flames, it slowly shrank, as if being consumed. This was a torment that felt almost like a form of torture. Mu Chen bit down hard, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Despite the excruciating pain that could drive a person insane, he did not swallow the divine spirit fruit. He knew that the physical body tribulation had only just begun. The refinement of his flesh would take considerable time. During this time, he had to endure this terrifying suffering. If he relaxed for even a moment, his mind would blur, and his body would turn to ashes in the flames. All the years of hard training would be for nothing. Come on, let me truly experience just how terrifying this physical body tribulation can be. Mu Chen's skin turned blood red as a low growl echoed from deep within his heart. Roar! It was as if the blood flames inside his body responded to the challenge in his heart, becoming even fiercer. The flames spread, burning across his flesh, while a strange force continued to temper his blood and flesh. Though the pain was unbearable, his flesh slowly began to condense and refine. In the cave, white mist swirled around Mu Chen. His body trembled continuously as beads of blood seeped out of his pores. Eventually, a thick layer of blood covered his entire body, encasing him completely. His fists slammed against the ground, using the impact to vent some of the intense pain from his body. Roar! A beast-like low growl came from his throat, echoing through the closed cave. This was the physical body tribulation, a torment feared by countless experts at the late heaven-reaching stage, and the first challenge for those stepping into the supreme stage. This pain would continue until Mu Chen's flesh and blood were completely refined and transformed by the blood flames. As Mu Chen endured the immense pain from the physical body tribulation, on the other side of the cave, there was another spacious cavern. A faint, fragrant aroma lingered in the air, and a young girl sat quietly, like a delicate lotus in still water. Her beauty made this simple meditation cave seem all the more enchanting. Luo Li's beautiful eyes gazed toward the right side of the cave, where a thick mountain barrier separated the two caverns. She had also gone through the physical body tribulation, knowing the immense pain it required to endure. Moreover, Mu Chen's body was inherently strong, so his physical body tribulation would be far more challenging than an average person's. This was actually the reason why many people would practice the body-forging divine art before undergoing the physical body tribulation, because although a powerful body could bring great strength, it would also lead to greater suffering during the tribulation. If one couldn't endure, all the hard training would be for nothing. Given this, many would choose to first focus on cultivating their spiritual energy and only attempt the body-forging divine art after passing the physical body tribulation. This would be safer. However, Mu Chen didn't choose that easier path. He chose the more difficult route because he knew that he needed great power. He had many things to protect. Luo Li gently bit her red lips, her beautiful eyes slightly lowered, unwilling to look at the cave walls. It felt as though she could see the young man struggling in agony there, which caused her even more pain than going through the physical body tribulation herself. Mu Chen, I won't let you struggle alone, she murmured softly. Her jade-like hand suddenly clenched tightly, and she quickly formed a seal. The vast spiritual energy inside her body began to stir, showing signs of boiling. It was the indication that the spiritual energy tribulation was about to come. Luo Li was going to undergo the spiritual energy tribulation. Inside the vast cave, the temperature was sweltering. Thick white mist surrounded the center of the cave, where a figure was seated in meditation. The intense heat emanated from there, and the ground was cracked and dry, with fissures spreading slowly throughout the cave. Boom. A deep sound came from the mist as Mu Chen slammed his fist into the ground. Instantly, cracks rapidly extended outward. His arms were covered with a layer of dark red blood shackles, the color caused by multiple layers of blood, which was horrifying to behold. Mu Chen sat in meditation, but his body hunched over, breathing heavily in pain. The blood fire inside him had been raging for nearly 10 days. For these 10 days, he had been constantly in excruciating pain, his flesh continuously burned and tempered by the blood fire. Although Mu Chen could clearly feel the power within his flesh becoming more refined due to the flames, the agony only intensified. Usually, the physical body tribulation would last around 7 to 8 days, but Mu Chen had already endured it for 10 days, and there were no signs of it stopping. However, Mu Chen had expected this. His body was naturally strong, so his tribulation was bound to be more intense. What he needed to do now was grit his teeth and endure. He believed that once he passed this tribulation, his strength would rise tremendously. Sizzle. Blood seeped out from the blood shackles, but quickly evaporated, turning into a dark red mist, which settled into the shackles. Mu Chen struggled to open his eyes. His vision blurred, and he shook his head vigorously. His body trembled again, as he could feel the blood fire inside him intensifying. The burning sensation felt as if it were trying to penetrate his flesh, wrapping around him and turning him into ash. My footsteps cannot stop here. The pain spread, and Mu Chen clenched his fists, roaring from deep within. Over the years, he had gone through countless life and death situations. His strong will wasn't something that came out of nowhere. It had been forged in those life or death moments. He had promised his father that he would bring his mother home. He had also promised the girl who would always be in his heart no matter where he was, that he would become a peerless strong man, shielding her from the wind and rain, protecting her. So, how could a mere physical body tribulation stop his path? Mu Chen bit down hard, finally swallowing the divine spirit fruit that had been in his mouth all this time. Immediately, a pure, cool energy rapidly spread throughout his body. The refreshing sensation made him nearly moan in relief. His blurry mind gradually cleared once again. As the cool power of the divine spirit fruit spread, the blood flame became even fiercer, as if trying to evaporate all of this power. A mere physical body tribulation. Can it stop me? Mu Chen roared in his heart, gritting his teeth as he once again endured the all-encompassing agony. This battle. He must win. The scorching heat rapidly spread through the cave, and within the steam-like white mist, oppressive low growls constantly echoed, sounding like beasts. Now, there was no turning back for him. He could only hold on until the end. Time passed quickly with Mu Chen's persistence, and in the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. Outside the cave, in midair, 3 figures floated. It was Su Huang, Zhao Qishan, and Mu Fengyang. Mu Chen and Luo Li don't seem to show any signs of coming out. Su Huang and the others looked at the still-closed caves and shrugged helplessly. The 3 of them had only endured their physical body tribulation for 5 days, but thanks to the divine spirit fruit, they had safely passed it without incident. Now, their strength had received a significant boost, making them true masters of the physical body tribulation. Mu Chen should be going through the same thing as us, right? Why is it taking so long? Zhao Qishan said with confusion. This isn't the same at all. Su Huang shook his head and said, before even undergoing the physical body tribulation, Mu Chen's physical strength was already stronger than most who had passed it, so his tribulation will be even more terrifying, and it will last longer. So don't compare our tribulations with his. His tone was filled with a hint of awe. They had almost watched Mu Chen rise from an inconspicuous freshman to become the top person in their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Although they had been working hard to improve, it was clear that they were still far behind him. In this world, there are always those monstrous geniuses whom others can only chase and look up to. What about Luo Li? She's also been in seclusion. Mu Fengyang looked at the other closed cave, where Luo Li was in seclusion. However, up until now, there was no sign of her coming out. Su Huang and Zhao Qishan exchanged glances, both filled with some confusion. Luo Li had already passed her physical body tribulation, and now she had been in seclusion for so long. Could it be that she was aiming for a breakthrough? If that was the case, could she be undergoing the spiritual energy tribulation? Upon thinking of this, Su Huang and the others were taken aback, and their hearts filled with excitement. If Luo Li could pass the spiritual energy tribulation, it would significantly boost their team's combat power. At that point, they would truly have the strength to rival elite teams. These breakthroughs are not something we can interfere with, So let's just wait quietly. Mu Chen and Luo Li are not ordinary people. I believe they will succeed in the end. Su Huang said. Zhao Qingshan and Mu Fengyang nodded in agreement. Though they understood that both Mu Chen's physical body tribulation and Luo Li's spiritual energy tribulation would be far more difficult than ordinary people's, they had great confidence in both of them. As for Mu Chen, there was no need to mention him. His brilliance at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy in the past 2 years was enough to make them admire him. As for Luo Li, although she never competed for glory within Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, even when the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition was held, her ranking on the Sky ranking was only in the top 10. However, no one dared to underestimate her strength, not even Mu Chen. Since the day Luo Li entered Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, no one had ever truly seen her unleash her full strength. No one knew just how powerful the girl with peerless beauty really was. Perhaps even Mu Chen couldn't be certain. But while in the academy, the girl had always quietly stood beside Mu Chen, smiling as she watched him achieve one dazzling accomplishment after another. Thus, many unconsciously forgot that this beautiful girl, unmatched in the academy, actually possessed strength that could rival anyone. While Su Huang and the others waited quietly for Mu Chen and Luo Li to emerge, they were unaware that, far in the distance, streaks of rainbow light silently passed by. The rainbow light beams, numerous in number, swept across the sky, emitting powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy. It was clear that these individuals were not weak. On top of a mountain, a flash of light appeared, followed by the emergence of 5 graceful figures. As they swayed, they were incredibly captivating. At the forefront of the 5 was a familiar face, beautiful, noble, and proud, like a phoenix soaring through the 9 heavens, basking in countless gazes of admiration from the earth below. She was Wen Qingxian. Captain, it seems like a lot of people have the same goal as us, said one of the 2 identical, exceptionally cute and obedient-looking girls behind Wen Qingxian, her voice delicate like a yellow aureole, as she gazed at the rainbow light streaking across the distant sky. Wen Qingxian gently nodded. Her slender jade-like hand lazily twirled a strand of her green hair. She tilted her head slightly, her beautiful eyes staring in that direction, then smiled and said, although Mu Chen's team hasn't increased their score in the past half-month, they haven't been kicked out of the top 16 yet. Naturally, their whereabouts are exposed. Also, there are rumors spreading that Mu Chen's team has obtained a Divine Hall invitation from the Wood God Temple, and it seems that within that temple, there is a complete ancient inheritance. That's why many teams are now heading in their direction. Captain, Mu Chen's position hasn't changed at all. Don't they realize that this will eventually lead to them being surrounded by other teams? A blonde girl with an outstanding figure beside Wen Qingxian frowned, staying in the same place for half a month. Wen Qingxian smiled slightly and said, they must be in seclusion. How interesting. Even with their whereabouts exposed, they still dare to blatantly cultivate in seclusion. This Mu Chen sure has guts. Captain, should we step in and drive those teams away? The 2 identical twin girls giggled. No need. Wen Qingxian waved her hand and smiled, her red lips curling into a playful arc. This is a good opportunity to see what this blood calamity of Spirit Road is capable of. If he's really so useless, don't blame me for taking away his beloved. As she said this, Wen Qingxuan's slender fingers gently clenched towards the distant direction. The smile on her lips, by her rosy mouth, was filled with captivating charm. Luo Li, I've found you. In the desolate mountain plains, towering peaks stood silently. The entire world seemed to be immersed in a barren stillness, with only the howling wind ravaging the land. On one of these mountains, Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and Mu Fengyang sat quietly, occasionally glancing towards the 2 still-closed caves. They smiled helplessly as they calculated the time. Mu Chen and Luo Li had been in seclusion for nearly 20 days. If Mu Chen and Luo Li were indeed undergoing the physical body tribulation and spiritual energy tribulation, then they had already endured it for almost 20 days? Just thinking about this made Su Huang and the others shudder. They had also experienced the pain of the physical body tribulation, a feeling as if their bodies were turning to ash, which was terrifying. Their tribulation lasted only 5 or 6 days, and that was almost enough to make them fail. But now, Mu Chen and Luo Li had endured for 20 days. Such a prolonged period of suffering, If they were constantly immersed in that burning pain, how terrifying must their endurance and willpower be? Su Huang and the others sighed with trepidation, a sense of admiration surging within them. Most people only see the impressive power of Mu Chen and the others, but who knows what they have sacrificed for that power? True strength in this world is never attained easily. Our ranking seems to have dropped to 14th. Zhao Qinshan looked at the academy token in his hand. After so many days of seclusion, their score hadn't increased, and they had been overtaken by other teams. Now, they were almost out of the top 16. Let it drop. Su Huang smiled and shook his head. Competing for this ranking is still too early. Even if we make it, we'll have our movements exposed. That constant feeling of being watched isn't pleasant. Mu Fengyong nodded as well. The Spiritual Academy Grand Competition was just beginning to heat up, and there was no need to focus too much on the score right now. After all, as Mu Chen had said before, at this stage, score doesn't matter. What matters is their strength. Once Mu Chen and Luo Li successfully emerge from their seclusion, we can go look for the true Wood God Temple ruins. By then, our team will definitely be as strong as any other. Su Huang's eyes burned with intensity. They had only followed Mu Chen so far and had already encountered a branch ruin of the Wood God Temple and overcome the physical body tribulation. Such rapid progress was almost miraculous, and the benefits from just one branch were already immense. How luxurious could the true Wood God Temple ruins be? Perhaps, by then, they might even be able to challenge the spiritual energy tribulation. Once they succeeded in that, their team would truly grow to its peak. At that point, they had absolute confidence to challenge any powerful team in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. Zhao Qinshan and Mu Fengyong also nodded seriously, their eyes filled with longing for the true Wood God Temple ruins. It was said that the ruins held ancient inheritances, and obtaining them would greatly benefit their future growth. Of course, while the Wood God Temple ruins were tempting, they understood that the three of them alone didn't have the strength to fight for it. Only under Mu Chen and Luo Li's leadership could they feel some sense of security. After all, even in a branch ruin, powerful teams like Xiahou and Zhenqing had appeared. The teams they would face in the true ruins would surely be even stronger. While Su Huang and the others were talking, their expressions suddenly shifted. They looked up toward the distant horizon, where the sound of rushing wind could be heard, followed by powerful spiritual energy fluctuations. Clearly, a large group was approaching. The three exchanged glances, their faces changing slightly. They quickly stood up, and with a wave of their hands, three long spirit artifacts, radiating sharp energy, materialized. Their eyes were wary as they watched the direction from which the wind and energy came. Judging by the sound of the wind, it seemed to be coming straight toward them. Su Huang and his team weren't foolish enough to think these people were just passing by this remote place. They were currently ranked in the top 16, and their position was clearly marked. They were an easy target, if these people were coming for them. Su Huang's expression darkened. With Mu Chen and Luo Li still in seclusion, they couldn't afford to be disturbed. No matter what, they had to protect them until they successfully emerged. Prepare to strike. We cannot let them disturb Mu Chen and Luo Li. Su Huang said in a low voice, his eyes turning cold. Zhao Qinshan and Mu Fengyong both nodded, their eyes filled with a fierce, wolf-like intensity. Whoosh! Whoosh! Under their watchful eyes, flashes of light appeared in the distant sky. Then, arcs of light quickly shot toward the mountain peak they were on. From the number of incoming figures, there were at least 30 of them, nearly the combined strength of 6 or 7 teams. Moreover, Su Huang and the others could sense that each of these teams was made up of elite warriors. Their eyes were sharp, and their bodies radiated powerful spiritual energy. At least half of them had reached the level of physical body tribulation. As the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition reached its peak, the many relics across the relic continent had clearly allowed many teams to rapidly increase their strength. At the start, it was already impressive for a team to have a leader who had passed the physical body tribulation, but as time went on, this became less remarkable. The strength of the physical body tribulation was no longer enough to command awe, as many people had started breaking through, utilizing the opportunities found on the relic continent. Su Huang and his team grew solemn. The 6 teams before them gave off a strong sense of pressure. From their actions, it was clear they were working together, not operating as individual teams. This shocked them. When did such an organized force appear in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition? In the competition, aside from the teams from each academy, most other teams were in opposition, making cooperation difficult. Take Xiahou and Zhenqing, for example. They worked together, but each had their own agenda, trying to use each other while holding back. But the mysterious teams now appearing were cooperating flawlessly. While not as perfect as their own team, it was clear this was genuine teamwork. Where had these people come from? As Su Huang and the others felt a twinge of fear, the group of people had already appeared above the mountain peak. Among them, a figure slowly stepped forward, a young man clad in a black robe. His eyes were cold and sharp, and his thin lips resembled a blade, immediately revealing that he was not someone to be trifled with. He gazed at Su Huang and the others atop the mountain, his brow furrowing slightly as he said, "You must be from the Northern Song Spirit Academy, right? Where's your leader, Chen? Who are you? What do you want?" Su Huang growled lowly. "I am Chen. As for what I'm here for." The young man in black robe curled the corner of his mouth into a mocking smile. "Of course, it's because I'm interested in the points you have, and also the Divine Wood token from the Divine Wood Temple, which originally belonged to Zhenqing." His gaze shifted, and he spotted the two closed caves. Raising an eyebrow, he remarked, "So you're in seclusion, huh? Last-minute scrambling. How interesting. If you want to take what's in our hands, you better be prepared." Su Huang gritted his teeth and sneered. At this moment, he was clearly trying to buy more time for Chen and Luoli. "Even Chen isn't qualified to speak to me like that. What are you three, just having passed the physical body tribulation? What are you worth? The Northern Song Spirit Academy is nothing but this." Chen smiled indifferently, but he wasn't one to waste time on idle chatter. With a casual wave of his hand, he ordered, "Capture them and destroy the cave." "Yes." 5 figures behind him immediately responded in unison, then surged forward, heading straight for Su Huang and the others. All 5 possessed the strength of having passed the physical body tribulation. "We fight." Su Huang's eyes flashed with fierce intent. Gripping his long spear, the 3 of them faced the formidable lineup before them without any intention of retreating. With a low shout, they leaped forward, crashing into the 5, their overwhelming spiritual energy causing a brief stalemate. Boom. Boom. The massive spiritual energy swept through, and despite facing 5 opponents, Su Huang and the others held their ground. For a moment, they managed to block their way, the intensity of their fighting spirit making it difficult for the enemy to advance. At that moment, on a distant peak, 5 graceful figures appeared, watching the scene without any intention of intervening. "Captain, it seems like the leader of the Northern Song Spirit Academy is in seclusion. How can these 3 possibly hold off these people?" The twin beauties glanced at the scene, their voices filled with lightheartedness. When Qin Xian slightly raised her head, her slender, pale neck resembling a graceful swan, she smiled softly and said, "No need to worry. This is their matter. Besides, I think the infamous blood calamity of Spirit Road should be able to handle this kind of trouble. Let's just watch for now." As they spoke, Qin coldly watched Su Huang and the others struggling to resist, his gaze shifting once again to the 2 closed caves. He then curled his fingers and flicked them lightly. A sharp beam of spiritual energy shot out, ruthlessly blasting toward one of the caves. His voice rang out like thunder, "Chen, get out here." Boom. The powerful light beam slammed into the cave, causing the entire mountain peak to tremble violently. Cracks spread across the mountain walls, and massive rocks tumbled down, crashing to the ground in a deafening roar. "Bastard!" Seeing this, Su Huang and the others' expressions darkened. Their eyes turned grim and savage, and with a fierce shout, they swung their long spears, exuding murderous intent. They attacked the 5 experts who had passed the physical body tribulation, their attacks ruthless and without any intention of defense. The ferocity of their assault caused the 5 to recoil, retreating hastily, not daring to engage with these crazed opponents. Although they dared not engage Su Huang and his group in a life-or-death struggle, the 5 opponents used their numerical advantage to keep the 3 of them tied down, preventing them from reaching the caves to protect them. Chen watched indifferently as the massive boulders from the cave tumbled down, dust filling the air. The massive rock blocking the entrance of the cave continued to crack apart, until with a loud boom, it shattered completely. After blasting open the cave, Chen pointed again into the air, sending another beam of spiritual energy speeding toward the cave, faster than lightning, slamming into it. The violent spiritual energy wreaked havoc inside the cave, producing deep, thunderous echoes. Chen was extremely ruthless in his actions. If there was anyone inside the cave in the midst of a breakthrough, his attack would be enough to severely injure them, causing their breakthrough to fail and leaving them with unimaginable wounds. "Go, throw the people inside out for me," Chen said with a faint smile, waving his hand. Behind him, 3 figures shot out, their spiritual energy fluctuations already reaching the level of the physical body tribulation. The three figures darted into the cave like lightning, their silhouettes vanishing instantly, followed by complete silence. Chen Shi's expression shifted slightly. His gaze grew colder as he stared at the dark cave. The three people he had sent in earlier hadn't made a sound, nor had they come back out, as though they had been erased the moment they entered the cave. This change took Chen Shi by surprise. After all, he hadn't felt any spiritual energy fluctuations from the cave, which clearly meant that the three hadn't even made a move before being taken care of. To eliminate three experts who had passed the physical body tribulation in such a short amount of time was no simple feat. People from Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, always hiding in the shadows, Chen Shi sneered, his eyes turning cold. It seemed his previous destruction hadn't had much effect, and the person meditating inside had already successfully broken through. Boom. Boom. With Chen Shi's words, three dark shadows suddenly shot out from the cave, rolling like balls before slamming into the ground, creating three huge craters. The onlookers' faces changed dramatically. Inside the craters lay three figures, drenched in blood. Those were the three experts who had entered the cave earlier. But now, no one could tell whether they were alive or dead. Chen Shi stared at the three figures, gritting his teeth, his eyes cold as he looked at the pitch-black cave. At that moment, soft, rustling footsteps echoed from within. The footsteps grew clearer, and a figure slowly emerged from the darkness, eventually stepping into the sunlight and into the gazes of all those present. When the crowd saw the figure clearly, they were stunned. It was a figure covered in thick blood shackles, looking eerie and strange. The blood-shackled figure stood at the entrance of the cave, the motionless eyes fixed on Chen Shi and the others in the sky. His body trembled slightly, and the blood shackles shattered layer by layer, finally splitting apart completely. As the shackles broke, Mu Chen's figure reappeared. At that moment, he was bare-chested, revealing a straight, well-defined torso. His body didn't have the bulging muscles of a fighter, appearing somewhat lean, yet this seemingly frail form exuded a terrifying power that made one's heart skip a beat. In mid-air, Su Huang and the others saw that Mu Chen had successfully exited his closed-door training, and they immediately felt immense relief, their anxieties finally lifted. Mu Chen was safe after all. Standing in the sunlight, Mu Chen's tall figure gleamed with a soft radiance, as if made of jade. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his deep black eyes were as profound as the night sky. Wow, he's quite handsome. Two cute twin girls on a distant mountain peak exclaimed as they gazed at the tall figure of the young man, their big eyes lighting up in surprise. That's the blood calamity instigator from Spirit Road, Mu Chen, right? Wen Qingxian also stared at the figure, somewhat surprised. He looked quite good, but she wasn't sure how capable he was. After all, the physical body tribulation wasn't exactly a strong level. She could tell that Mu Chen's current power wasn't particularly high. However, even though she had figured it out, Wen Qingxian wasn't naive. If Mu Chen had truly only reached the physical body tribulation, he wouldn't have made it this far. And there was also the matter of the three experts who had entered the cave earlier. They had been knocked out without much resistance, then thrown out like garbage. Didn't anyone in your spiritual academy teach you that disturbing someone during their cultivation is highly unethical? Mu Chen looked up, his eyes cold as he met Chen Shi's gaze, and he smiled slightly. Mu Chen smiled and nodded. Hand over the wood god token from the divine wood temple, and I'll let you go. Chen Shi extended his palm and said slowly. Mu Chen shook his head with a smile, gazing at the gradually cold expression on Chen Shi's face. Hand over your points, and I'll only knock you out. Huh. From a distant mountain peak, a pair of adorable twin girls immediately covered their mouths and giggled. You dare to act so recklessly. Chen Shi's lips twitched, and anger flared in his eyes. Was Mu Chen an idiot? There were 15 experts here, all of whom had undergone the physical body tribulation, and Chen Shi himself had reached the spiritual energy tribulation stage. The others were all in the late heaven-reaching stage. Even if they encountered a master in the spiritual energy tribulation stage, they'd turn and flee. But now, this idiot actually dared to provoke them? Everyone attack. Capture him and cripple him. Chen Shi growled coldly. Yes. The experts beside him responded in unison, their eyes turning sinister as they locked onto Mu Chen. In the next instant, their figures shot forward like lightning. Waves of overwhelming spiritual energy surged, and dozens of spirit energy whips capable of cracking mountains tore through the air, heading straight for Mu Chen. However, despite the terrifying onslaught, Mu Chen remained standing outside the cave, his body motionless. Boom, boom. The massive attacks descended, striking him with immense force. Spiritual energy raged, and the entire mountain seemed to collapse. He's so dumb. He didn't even try to dodge. The twin girls in the distance let out a delicate laugh. When Xingxian slightly raised her phoenix-like eyes, staring at the place where the spiritual energy raged. Her gaze hardened slightly, seeking death. Chun-Shi grinned cruelly, staring at the swirling smoke and dust. He sneered. Even a master in the spiritual energy tribulation wouldn't dare to take such an attack head-on. This Mu Chen was truly an idiot. Was this the kind of disciple trained by the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy? Ridiculous. But his mocking smile didn't last long. When the dust finally settled, the thin, muscular figure still stood calmly in place. Chun-Shi's grin slowly froze. Meanwhile, Su Huang and the others exhaled heavily, sweat dripping down their foreheads. Mu Chen brushed off the non-existent dust on his body, looked down, then nodded with satisfaction. After overcoming the physical body tribulation, his body had become terrifyingly strong. For an attack like earlier, he hadn't used any spiritual energy defense. He had resisted purely with his physical body. Had he not passed the tribulation, he wouldn't have been so arrogant, but now, he was entirely different. It seems my suggestion earlier was not to your liking. Mu Chen looked at Chun-Shi and smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in his expression. Since that's the case, I'll have to take matters into my own hands. Attack. Finish him off. Chun-Shi's eyes darkened, and his face grew even more serious. No wonder Mu Chen had been able to defeat Jin Qing and the others. He really had some ability. But with their powerful lineup, he didn't believe Mu Chen could turn the tide. Whoosh! However, just as Chun-Shi ordered, a deafening sound of sword hum erupted from the mountain behind Mu Chen. A sword chi shot into the sky, splitting the mountain in half. The broken edges were as smooth as a mirror, like tofu. The sword chi rampaged through the heavens and earth, and a streak of light shot out, landing beside Mu Chen. As the light faded, a stunningly beautiful young girl appeared. The girl held a long sword, her long hair flowing like the Milky Way, and her glass-like eyes were so beautiful they could mesmerize anyone who gazed into them. Luo Li had finally emerged from her seclusion. On the distant mountain peak, when Qin Xian, who had been lazily observing, now looked at the familiar and graceful figure with bright, sparkling eyes. Her lips slowly curled into a soft, charming smile.